Tommy's ball rolled into the wrong yard. He knew he shouldn't chase it. Every kid on Oakwood Street knew the rules. Never go near the house with a broken fence. Never get close to the backyard where the chain rattled in the dark. And never, ever look at Shadow. But it was Tommy's favorite ball. The red one his dad gave him before he moved away. Tommy stood at the edge of Mr. Harris's property and stared at the ball sitting in the grass, just 5 steps away. "I can grab it real quick," Tommy whispered to himself. He took 1 step forward. The growl started low, like thunder rolling in from far away. Then it got louder, deeper, meaner. Tommy froze. From behind the house, Shadow appeared. He was the biggest, blackest dog Tommy had ever seen. His fur was matted and dirty. Scars ran across his face and shoulders like lightning bolts frozen in time. His teeth were white daggers, sharp and ready. The heavy chain around his neck pulled tight as he charged forward, his paws tearing up the grass. Tommy screamed and ran. He heard the chain snap tight. Shadow's bark exploded behind him like a cannon. Tommy's legs pumped as fast as they could go. He didn't stop until he was safe inside his own house, his heart pounding so hard it hurt. His mom found him crying in the kitchen. "I told you to stay away from that house," she said, hugging him tight. "That dog is dangerous, baby. He's hurt people before. Why doesn't someone take him away?" Tommy asked between sobs. His mom sighed. "Mr. Harris won't let him go. He says Shadow protects his property. Says the dog is just doing his job." But everyone knew the truth. Shadow wasn't protecting anything. He was a monster, a beast, a creature made of anger and teeth. The neighbors whispered about him at mailboxes and over fences. "That dog attacked a delivery man last year," Mrs. Chun said. "Bit him right through his pants. 20 stitches. Harris should put him down," Mr. Rodriguez muttered, "before he kills someone." "That chain won't hold forever," someone else added. "One day it'll snap, and then what?" Mr. Harris heard all the talk. He didn't care. He was a big man with thick arms and a voice that boomed like Shadow's bark. He worked at the factory and came home tired and angry. He kept Shadow in the backyard, chained to a metal post that was buried deep in concrete. "Shadow's fine," Harris would say when people complained. "He's a guard dog. That's what he's supposed to do, scare people off." But there was something else. Something Harris didn't talk about. Sometimes, late at night, people heard Shadow whimpering. Not barking, not growling, crying, like he was in pain, like he was afraid. Nobody knew why. Then Grace arrived. She came on a Tuesday morning in a car that coughed and sputtered before it finally stopped. Grace was a thin woman with kind eyes and hair pulled back in a neat bun. She wore a simple blue dress and carried a small brown bag. She was a new maid, hired to clean Mr. Harris's house twice a week. The neighbors watched from their windows. "She won't last," Mrs. Chin said to her husband. "That dog will scare her away in a day." Grace walked up to the front door and knocked. Mr. Harris opened it, looking surprised. "You're the cleaning lady?" he asked. "Yes, sir. Grace Henderson. You call the agency?" Harris grunted. "Yeah. Come in. House is a mess. Don't bother the backyard. That's where I keep my dog." "A dog?" Grace smiled. "I love dogs." "Not this one. You don't. Shadow's not friendly. Don't go near him. Don't try to pet him. Don't even look at him too long. You understand?" Grace nodded, but something flickered in her eyes. Curiosity, maybe, or something else. She stepped inside. The house was dark and cluttered. Dirty dishes filled the sink. Clothes covered the furniture. Empty beer bottles lined the counter. Grace set her bag down and got to work without complaining. But every now and then, she glanced toward the back window. She could see the yard, the rusty chain. And at the end of that chain, Shadow lay in the dirt, his head on his paws. He looked tired, sad even, not like a monster at all. Grace finished the kitchen and moved to the living room. As she dusted the shelves, she heard it, a low whimper from outside. Then another. She stopped and listened. Shadow was crying again. Mr. Harris was upstairs, taking a shower. Grace put down her dust cloth and walked quietly to the back door. She unlocked it and stepped outside. The yard was a mess. Weeds grew everywhere. An old doghouse sat in the corner, half collapsed. Shadow's water bowl was empty and covered in algae. His food dish had flies buzzing around it. Shadow lifted his head. His eyes locked onto Grace. For a moment, neither of them moved. The neighbors would have screamed. They would have run. They would have called Shadow a demon, a killer, a beast that couldn't be trusted. But Grace saw something different. She saw pain. She saw fear. She saw a creature who had been hurt so badly that he forgot how to trust. Shadow's lip curled back. A growl rumbled in his chest. But he didn't stand. He didn't charge. He watched her with eyes that seemed to ask a question. Are you going to hurt me too? Grace didn't move closer. She didn't try to touch him. She just stood there, her hands at her sides, her voice soft as a whisper. Hello, Shadow, she said. I'm Grace. I'm not going to hurt you. The dog's ears twitched. I know you're scared, Grace continued. I know someone hurt you bad. But I'm not them. I'm different. Shadow's growl faded. He tilted his head, confused. Nobody had ever talked to him like this before. Not with kindness. Not with gentleness. I'm going to help you, Grace said. I don't know how yet, but I promise you I'm going to help. From the upstairs window, Mr. Harris watched in shock. The new maid was standing in front of his vicious dog, and Shadow hadn't attacked. He hadn't moved. He was listening. Harris ran downstairs and burst through the back door. What are you doing? He shouted. Get away from him. He'll tear you apart. Grace turned slowly, calmly. He won't hurt me, Mr. Harris. You don't know what you're talking about. Shadow's dangerous. No, sir, Grace said quietly. Shadow's afraid. Harris stared at her like she was crazy. Afraid? That dog doesn't fear anything. He attacks everyone who gets near him. Because someone taught him to, Grace said. Someone made him this way. What are you talking about? Grace looked back at Shadow. The dog was still watching her, his body tense but not aggressive. This dog's been hurt, Grace said. Badly. And until someone shows him that not all people are cruel, he'll keep acting like this. He's not a monster, Mr. Harris. He's just broken. Harris opened his mouth to argue, but the words died in his throat, because for the first time in years, Shadow wasn't barking at someone in his yard. He was quiet, almost peaceful. I need to finish my work, Grace said, walking past Harris and back into the house. Harris stood in the yard, staring at his dog. Shadow stared back. And something small, something almost impossible, began to change. Grace came back on Thursday. Mr. Harris was waiting for her at the door. He looked like he hadn't slept well. His eyes were red and tired. Before you start, he said, I need to tell you something. About Shadow. Grace set down her bag. I'm listening. Harris rubbed his face with both hands. I didn't always have him. Shadow came from a security company. They trained him to guard warehouses and factories. He was the best they had. Fearless, strong, aggressive when he needed to be. What happened? Grace asked softly. There was a fire, Harris said, his voice dropping. 3 years ago. Shadow was guarding a warehouse downtown when it started. The night guard was supposed to watch him, but the man panicked. He ran out and locked the doors behind him. He left Shadow inside. Grace's hand went to her mouth. Shadow was trapped in there for almost an hour, Harris continued. By the time the firefighters broke through, half the building had collapsed. They found Shadow hiding under a metal shelf, burned and terrified. The smoke had damaged his lungs. The heat had scarred his body. That poor creature, Grace whispered. The security company didn't want him anymore, Harris said. Said he was too traumatized at work. They were going to put him down. I worked at the warehouse next door. I saw what happened. I felt bad for him, so I took him in. That was kind of you, Grace said. Harris shook his head. I thought I could fix him. I thought if I gave him food and shelter, he'd go back to normal. But he never did. Every loud noise makes him crazy. Every stranger makes him attack. He remembers that fire, Grace. He remembers being left to die. Grace looked toward the backyard. And you keep him on that chain. I have to. Harris said, his voice rising. He's dangerous. If I let him loose, he'll hurt someone. Or maybe, Grace said carefully, he's on that chain because you're afraid of him, just like he's afraid of everything else. Harris stared at her. Nobody had ever said that to him before. Grace picked up her bag. May I go see him? I don't think that's a good idea. Mr. Harris, Grace said, her voice gentle but firm, I lost my son when he was 7 years old. He got sick, very sick, and he was so scared all the time. Scared of the doctors, scared of the medicine, scared of the pain. Harris's expression softened. The only thing that helped him, Grace continued, was when I sat with him and talked to him. When I showed him that even though he was scared, he wasn't alone. Shadow's scared too, and he's been alone for 3 years. She walked to the back door before Harris could stop her. Shadow was lying in the same spot as before. When Grace stepped outside, his head snapped up, his body went rigid. The growl started immediately, but Grace didn't run. She sat down on the back steps, about 15 feet away from him, far enough to be safe, close enough for him to hear her. Good morning, Shadow, she said. The dog's growl continued, low and warning. Grace reached into her bag and pulled out a sandwich wrapped in paper. She unwrapped it slowly, then broke off a piece of turkey. She tossed it gently toward Shadow. It landed a few feet in front of him. Shadow stared at it, then at her, then back at the meat. He didn't move. It's okay, Grace said. It's for you. I made it this morning. No poison, no tricks, just food. Shadow's nose twitched. He could smell it. His stomach was probably empty. Mr. Harris fed him, but not much, not enough. Slowly, Shadow crawled forward. His body stayed low to the ground, ready to run. He grabbed the meat in his teeth and scrambled backward. Grace smiled. There you go. See? I'm not so bad. She tossed another piece. This time, Shadow took it faster. You know what I think? Grace said, her voice soft as wind through leaves. I think you're not mean. I think you're just remembering. Every time someone comes close, you remember that fire. You remember being trapped. You remember that man who left you behind. Shadow stopped chewing. His ears swiveled toward her voice. But here's the thing about memories, Grace said. They can change. Not the past. That's done. But the way you feel about it. My son was scared of doctors. But there was one nurse, Miss Patricia, who sang to him. Every time she came into his room, she sang the same song. After a while, my boy stopped being scared when she was there. He started to smile. Grace tossed another piece of turkey. We can make new memories, Shadow. Better ones. Ones that don't hurt. The dog ate the meat, but didn't retreat this time. He stayed where he was, watching her. From the kitchen window, Mr. Harris watched in amazement. Shadow wasn't barking, wasn't lunging at the chain. He was calm. Grace came back every Tuesday and Thursday for 3 weeks. Each time, she sat on the steps. Each time, she brought food. Each time, she talked to Shadow in that soft, patient voice. She told him about her son, about her garden, about the birds that sang in the morning, and the way rain sounded on a tin roof. She talked about nothing important, but everything that mattered. And slowly, day by day, Shadow began to change. The growling came less often. He started eating from her hand by the 2nd week. By the 3rd week, he let her sit just 5 feet away. Mr. Harris noticed other changes too. Shadow's whimpering at night had stopped. He ate his food instead of letting it rot. When Grace was in the house, Shadow would sit up and watch the back door, waiting for her to come out. I don't understand, Harris said one afternoon. Nobody's ever gotten close to him like this. Not even me. What are you doing? Grace was washing dishes. She smiled. I'm not doing anything special, Mr. Harris. I'm just listening. Animals are like people. They remember who hurt them, but they also remember who helps them. Shadow just needed someone to prove that not everyone is the same. But why you? Harris asked. Why does he trust you? Grace dried her hands on a towel. Maybe because I don't expect anything from him. I'm not trying to train him or control him. I'm just showing him kindness. no strings attached. Harris sat down at the kitchen table. I've kept him chained for 3 years. I thought it was the right thing to do. Keep everyone safe. You were scared, Grace said. That's understandable. But fear makes us do things that don't always help. Keeping Shadow on that chain didn't make him better. It just reminded him every day that he's trapped, just like the fire. Harris put his head in his hands. I've been making it worse. You didn't know, Grace said kindly. But now you do, and now we can help him. That afternoon, something happened that changed everything. Tommy came home from school. He was bouncing his red ball in the front yard, trying to keep it away from Mr. Harris's property. But the ball had other ideas. It bounced once, twice, then rolled, fast and straight, right to the gap in the fence. Tommy's heart sank. No, mater. He looked around. No adults were watching. Maybe he could grab it real quick. Shadow hadn't bothered him in weeks. Maybe the dog was asleep. Tommy took a deep breath and squeezed through the fence. He ran toward the ball, his shoes barely making a sound on the grass. He was 3 steps away when he heard it, the chain rattling. Shadow had been sleeping in his doghouse. But the moment Tommy entered the yard, something ancient and terrible woke up inside the dog. Not anger, not meanness, fear. Shadow exploded from the doghouse, teeth bared, eyes wild. He saw a small figure running toward him. His brain flashed back to the fire, to the chaos, to the hand that grabbed him and hurt him. He charged. The chain pulled tight, but Shadow kept lunging, his paws digging into the dirt, his bark splitting the air like thunder. Tommy screamed and fell backward. Shadow was only 6 feet away, straining against the chain with every ounce of strength he had. The metal post groaned. It was starting to bend. Tommy scrambled backward, tears streaming down his face. The back door flew open. Grace ran out. "Shadow and O!" she shouted. But her voice wasn't angry. It wasn't harsh. It was the voice she'd used for 3 weeks. The voice that brought turkey sandwiches and soft words. The voice that sang about rain and birds and better days. Shadow froze. His teeth were still bared. His body was still tense. But he stopped pulling. Grace walked forward slowly, her hands out in front of her. "Easy, boy," she said. "Easy. I know what you're feeling. I know you're scared. But that's just a little boy. He's not going to hurt you." Shadow's eyes darted between Grace and Tommy. "Look at me," Grace said. "Shadow, look at me." The dog's eyes locked onto hers. "Good boy," Grace whispered. "That's it. I'm right here. You're safe." Shadow's breathing slowed. His growl faded. Grace knelt down, still 10 feet away. "I know what they did to you. I know they left you in that fire. But Tommy didn't do that. I didn't do that. We're different. We're here to help." Shadow whimpered. It was the same sound the neighbors heard at night. But now they understood it. It wasn't the sound of a monster. It was the sound of something broken, trying so hard to heal. Grace turned to Tommy. "Honey, I need you to stand up slowly and walk to me. Don't run. Just walk." Tommy was shaking, but he nodded. He got to his feet and walked carefully toward Grace. When he reached her, she put her arm around him. "Now," Grace said, "I want you to pick up your ball and say something to Shadow." "What?" Tommy whispered. "What do I say?" "Tell him you're sorry for scaring him." Tommy looked at the big, scarred dog. Shadow was panting now, exhausted. His eyes were still wide, but the wildness was gone. "I'm sorry, Shadow," Tommy said, his voice barely audible. "I didn't mean to scare you." Shadow's ears went flat against his head. He took 1 step back, then another. Then he lay down in the dirt, his head on his paws, and closed his eyes. Grace helped Tommy out of the yard. When they were safe on the other side of the fence, Tommy looked up at her. "Is he going to be okay?" the boy asked. Grace nodded. "He's going to be just fine. We just need to give him time." After that day with Tommy, something shifted in Mr. Harris. He stopped seeing Shadow as a problem to contain. He started seeing him as Grace did, as a soul in pain, waiting for someone to care enough to help. "What do we do now?" Harris asked Grace the next Tuesday. Grace was sitting on the back steps, Shadow lying just 3 feet away from her. The dog's eyes were half closed, peaceful. We set him free, Grace said. Harris's eyes went wide. What? No, he'll run away. He'll hurt someone. Mr. Harris, Grace said calmly, that chain isn't keeping anyone safe. It's keeping Shadow trapped in his fear. Every day he's on that chain, he remembers being trapped in that fire. We have to show him he's not a prisoner anymore. But what if he remembers that someone finally trusted him? Grace interrupted gently. What if he remembers that someone believed he could be good again? Harris looked at his dog. Shadow was watching them both. His scarred face turned toward Grace like a flower following the sun. I'm scared, Harris admitted. So is he, Grace said. But we're going to do this together. All of us. That Saturday morning, Grace arrived early. Mr. Harris was already in the backyard, standing near Shadow's post. Tommy and his mother were there too, watching from the fence. Even Mrs. Chun and Mr. Rodriguez had come to see what would happen. Everyone was afraid, but everyone was hopeful too. Grace walked into the yard carrying a new collar, a soft blue one with Shadow's name stitched in white letters. She also brought a long leash and a bag full of treats. Shadow stood up when he saw her. His tail wasn't wagging, but it wasn't tucked between his legs either. He was curious. Hey, boy, Grace said softly. Today's a big day for you. She knelt down beside him. Shadow sniffed her hand, her face, her hair. Then he did something he'd never done before. He licked her cheek. Grace smiled, tears filling her eyes. That's right, baby. You're going to be okay. She reached for the heavy chain around his neck. Shadow tensed. His breathing got faster. He remembered chains. He remembered being trapped. Easy, Grace whispered. I'm not putting anything on you. I'm taking this off. Her fingers worked the clasp. It was old and rusty, but after a moment it clicked open. The chain fell away. For the first time in 3 years, Shadow was free. He stood perfectly still, like he couldn't believe it. He looked down at the chain lying in the dirt. Then he looked at Grace. You're free, she said, her voice cracking with emotion. No more chain. No more prison. Shadow took one step forward. Then another. He walked in a small circle, testing his legs, feeling the freedom in his muscles. Then he looked at the fence. The gate was open. He could run. He could leave this place and never come back. Everyone held their breath. Shadow turned back to Grace. He walked to her and sat down at her feet. He chose to stay. Mr. Harris let out a breath he didn't know he'd been holding. Tommy's mother wiped tears from her eyes. Even tough Mr. Rodriguez had to clear his throat and look away. Grace clipped the new collar around Shadow's neck and attached the leash. Let's go for a walk, she said. They walked out of the backyard together. Shadow stayed close to Grace's side, his head up, his eyes alert but not afraid. When they passed Tommy, the boy held out his hand nervously. Can I pet him? Tommy asked. Grace looked at Shadow. What do you think, boy? Can Tommy be your friend? Shadow looked at the small boy who had scared him so badly days before. He sniffed Tommy's hand. Then, slowly, carefully, he pressed his head against Tommy's palm. Tommy's face lit up with the biggest smile. He likes me. He trusts you, Grace corrected. That's even better. Over the next few weeks, Shadow became a different dog. Mr. Harris built him a real doghouse with soft blankets inside. He filled the water bowl every morning and gave Shadow good food, not scraps, but real dog food that made his coat shine. Grace kept visiting, but now she brought Shadow to the park. They walked through the neighborhood together. At first, people crossed the street when they saw him coming, but Grace would stop and talk to them. This is Shadow, she'd say. He's learning to trust again. Would you like to meet him? Most people said no at first, but after a while they got curious. They saw how calm Shadow was with Grace, how gentle he was with Tommy, how he'd sit quietly while children played nearby. Mrs. Chung was the first to change her mind. She brought Shadow a treat one afternoon, a homemade biscuit shaped like a bone. I'm sorry I called you a monster, she said to the dog. I didn't understand. Shadow took the treat gently from her hand and wagged his tail. One by one, the neighbors stopped being afraid. They started saying hello when Shadow walked by. Some even asked if their own dogs could meet him. Shadow made his first dog friend, a golden retriever named Daisy from 2 houses down. They played in the park, chasing each other in circles, rolling in the grass like puppies. The old Shadow, the one who only knew fear and anger, was disappearing. In his place was a dog who remembered what it felt like to be happy. But the biggest change came one afternoon when the mailman arrived. It was the same mailman Shadow had bitten 3 years ago. The man froze where he saw Shadow lie on the front porch. No chain, no fence. "Mr. Harris," the mailman called nervously. "Your dog is loose." Harris came to the door with Grace beside him. "It's okay, Paul. Shadow's different now." Different. Paul looked doubtful. "That dog took a chunk out of my leg." "I know," Harris said, "and I'm sorry, but Grace has been working with him. He's not the same dog anymore." Grace walked over to Shadow and knelt beside him. "Shadow," she said, "this is Paul. I know you remember him. I know you were scared that day, but Paul's a good man. He brings us our mail. He's our friend." Shadow looked at the mailman. His body tensed slightly, but he didn't growl. He didn't bare his teeth. Grace took Shadow's paw and held out like a handshake. "Can you say you're sorry?" Paul stared at them. Then, slowly, he stepped forward and shook Shadow's paw. "Apology accepted," Paul said, his voice shaking a little. Then he smiled. "You really are different, aren't you, boy?" Shadow's tail wagged. From that day on, Shadow waited on the porch every afternoon when Paul delivered the mail. Sometimes Paul brought him a treat. Sometimes he just stopped to scratch Shadow behind the ears. The monster of Oakwood Street was gone. In his place was a dog who knew he was loved. One evening, as the sun was setting, Tommy came over to play in Mr. Harris's yard. Shadow was lying in the grass, watching the boy bounce his red ball. Tommy stopped bouncing and looked at the dog. "Hey, Shadow, want to play?" He threw the ball gently. Shadow jumped up and ran after it. He grabbed it in his mouth and brought it back, dropping it at Tommy's feet. The boy laughed. "Good boy." They played until fireflies came out, until Tommy's mother called him home for dinner, until the stars began to appear in the darkening sky. Grace watched from the porch, sitting next to Mr. Harris. "You saved him," Harris said quietly. "I don't know how you did it, but you saved him." Grace shook her head. "I didn't save him, Mr. Harris. I just reminded him that he was worth saving. Shadow did the rest. He's a brave one." Harris looked at his dog. Play with the boy he'd almost hurt. I was wrong about him. All this time, I thought keeping him on that chain was protecting people. But I was really just giving up on him. "People teach fear," Grace said, "but people can also teach love. It just takes patience. And believing that change is possible." That night, after Grace went home and Tommy went to bed, Shadow lay down on the porch beside Mr. Harris. The man reached down and scratched the dog's scarred head. "I am sorry," Harris whispered. "I'm sorry I didn't help you sooner." Shadow looked up at him with dark, gentle eyes. Then he rested his head on Harris's foot and closed his eyes. The broken chain still lay in the backyard, half buried in the dirt, but it didn't matter anymore. The real chains, the ones made of fear and pain and bad memories, those were finally gone. Shadow had learned the truth that changed everything. Monsters aren't born. They're made by the people who hurt them and the people who give up on them. But love, real, patient, never giving up love, can unmake a monster and reveal the good heart that was there all along. When courage is paired with compassion, even the wildest hearts can learn to love again. And Shadow's heart, once wild and wounded, had finally learned to trust. One gentle voice at a time. One day at a time, one act of kindness at a time, until the monster became a friend, until the broken became whole, until the chain became free. Shadow was home, and he was loved. If this story touched your heart, hit that like button and share it with someone who needs to hear that change is possible. Subscribe for more stories about hope, healing, and second chances. Remember, everyone deserves someone who believes in them, even when they've forgotten how to believe in themselves. What did you think of Shadow's journey? Drop a comment below and let us know.